We wanted to do this topic to just give you a bit of support as graduates, first and foremost. So we're going to talk about what stress is, cover off some of the signs and symptoms that you might want to look out for, and then we're going to talk about resilience. So we'll introduce what resilience is. I'm going to talk through a nice model that's kind of easy to digest, and it kind of incorporates what resilience is and how you build it, and then helpful strategies as well. So we recognise that as a graduate population, you are subject to a variety of challenges and adverse situations that perhaps your more experienced counterparts aren't. So you are a unique population, and therefore it's important that we're able to give you some support. So we're just going to start off with a slide to give you a bit of context about the significance of stress and poor mental health in the UK. Some people might look at those and statistics and be a bit surprised by some of them, others might not. But the most important one really here is the first one. The majority of mental health conditions do develop before the age of 24. So as graduates, most of you are probably under or around this age. So it's really important to get into good habits early on in your careers, just so that you don't get burned out and reduce your risk of experiencing poor mental health as a result of adverse situations. Work-related stress is a big concern in the UK, and there's different types of pressures that can contribute to this. So tight deadlines, having too much responsibility, not having enough control or autonomy in your role, and a lack of managerial support as well. Some of these might seem, you might have felt these yourself. Others might be in roles where you've got really good support. So it's all about having a balance. So we'll all have stress in our jobs, but it's just about making sure that the resources you have outweigh those really, and that there's a good balance there. So first of all, we're going to talk about what stress is. So stress is a physical response. Some people liken it to an emotion or a feeling, but really what it is, it's a biological physical response. And it's a response that is triggered in situations where your body feels like it's under stress and in life-threatening situations. So back in evolutionary times, when we were cavemen, for example, the stress responses really have evolved to save your life. There might be situations where, for example, you walk out into the middle of the road and you see an oncoming car. Your body is required to react. So it's your body's way of sending blood to the right muscles and conserving those resources so that you're able to respond. And it's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. Everyone has a threshold and an optimum level, which is what this little diagram here represents. So over to the left, you'll see that this is where you have absolutely no stress whatsoever. And this isn't a good thing, because you need stress, you need levels of stress to respond to things, but also to motivate you. So some people might say that they work better under pressure. I'm certainly one of those people. So being at this kind of left-hand side of the curve where I've got no stress or pressure whatsoever is actually negative for my own well-being and productivity. But then if we look at the far right, this is when you're having too much stress and your body's in this constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. And this can impact things like your ability to make decisions. You can have more mistakes. And it also has a significant impact on your physical and mental health as well. Because if you imagine being constantly under stress and pressure, it's like a pressure cooker. At some point it's going to boil over. So it's important to try and stay within these optimum levels, and it's going to be different for everyone. So it's about really trying to work out for yourself, what is your peak performance level, and at what point do you think that you're maybe stretching further over into that right-hand side. So it takes a bit of trial and error, and it's all about building self-awareness. So when we talk about the causes of stress and causes of poor mental health, they generally fall into three categories. So social impact to things like the number of stressful events that are happening in our life at any one time, the nature of those events, for example, a deadline versus a redundancy, they're slightly different. The availability of social support, so who you've got around you to talk to and help you, but also things like cultural norms. So in some cultures, it's seen as weak or wrong to talk about mental health, and so sometimes you can internalize these things and that can exacerbate things further. So if you've got a good social support around you and you're in a very kind of collectivist culture where it's okay to talk about things and it's normal to ask for social support, then it can be more protective than if you're not. The biology is a big part as well. So this is talking about things like our immune system, the stress hormone, which is cortisol. Some people have naturally higher levels of that hormone. But then it's also about things like our circadian rhythms as well. And some people are born with slight predisposition to reacting to stress a bit more sensitively than others. But the most important contributing factor here is our psychology. And this is the bit that we have the most control over. And it's all to do with our thoughts, our beliefs, the way we think about things. And it's got a really powerful influence on our response to stress. So the psychological part is what we're going to focus on today, as well as some of the social support as well. But it's really about giving yourself the skills to view situations better and to handle them better. And this is all about the way we think. So now we've talked about the different causes of stress and how it can lead to issues with our mental health. I wanted to include a slide here with some signs and symptoms, because this is the bit that sometimes we can fail to notice, especially in the earlier stages. It's helpful to be aware of some of the warning signs like disrupted sleep or problems with concentration, so that you can identify the cause and address it earlier before it becomes a significant problem or things get worse. You'll see from the chart that generally there is a progression. So sometimes the changes can be really subtle and easy to manage, like a couple of nights of bad sleep, for example. But they can quickly escalate into more serious problems. And if they're not dealt with, then they can just get worse. So it's really important that you don't ignore them. And sometimes we're not consciously stressed. So we might feel particularly fine, but notice some slight changes that can't actually be explained by anything else. So this is where building self-awareness and learning what triggers you to feel stressed and the reactions that you generally have is really important. So there's a bit of a personal example. I know that when I'm particularly stressed, I noticed this in my final year of my master's, that there are certain physical symptoms that I experience, like problems with digestion and an upset stomach. And it's not that obvious because psychologically I didn't feel stressed any more or less than usual. So it's taken some time to work out. But over time, I've been able to notice these patterns, and I've realised that I need to be a bit more proactive with planned relaxation, just to help my body switch off. So after this, you can look at these, this chart in a bit more detail and maybe notice if there are areas within this reacting stage that you notice at particular times. But the important thing here and what we're trying to cultivate is that generally speaking, you're in the healthy range, and we're all going to go through getting in the reacting stage as well. So we'll all have times where we feel irritable, impatient, nervous, sad, and so on. But it's trying to keep it there and not getting into this injured and ill stage. So this is where prevention and being proactive about things is really important. So going from studying to full-time professional work is a big transition and can be really challenging, especially if this is your first experience of a professional job. Of course, some of you will find it easier than others, and every person will be impacted in slightly different ways. But there are noticeable differences between the two. So it can increase your stress levels. But remember what we said earlier, that some level of stress is important and you do need it and it's a good thing. It's just about making sure that it doesn't become too much. So when you transition from studying to work, that you'll notice a lot of changes. So you're used to having teachers or lecturers generally supporting you, and they have your best interests at heart. There's little competition, so you're working for you and your own goal, versus when you're in the workplace, you're actually working with others and you're working towards a collective goal. And you'll also have your own interests at heart as well. So sometimes it can be competitive, especially if you've got multiple people going for the same job or the same promotion. And managers who are your supervisors, they act as sometimes your teachers, might not always be doing everything for the benefit solely of you. They've also got to do their own jobs, and they've got the company's interests at heart as well. So that can be difficult to navigate. Relationships are something that can be quite hard to navigate at the beginning, because in the workplace, relationships are very different to the ones at university. You probably will have built relationships with people that you wanted to, or people that you liked more, had more in common with. And for the most part, people you're with are similar age to you and have similar interests. But at work, you don't have this luxury. You don't have as much control over who you have to work with or collaborate with. And this is where conflicts can sometimes occur, and it can be difficult to know how to manage those. Time management is another one, and this is something that I found quite difficult. So when I first started my first job out of university, which was in recruitment, my biggest challenge was time management and organisation. I'd never been someone that had planned all of my assignments ahead of time. I'd like to say I was, but I really wasn't. So in many cases, I did leave things to the last minute. And I still did well, because I work well under pressure, but I realised that this way of organising myself just wouldn't cut it in the workplace, because I was no longer just working for me. There were other people relying on me to get things done, to be organised. So this is something that did make me feel quite stressed at the beginning, because sometimes I felt like I didn't have enough time to do everything that I needed to do, and I still have that now. So this was a bit of a transition for me, and I'm still working on it, I'm still learning it, but this is something that can be quite common. So just giving yourself the ability to manage your time better, and we can talk about ways you can do this a bit later. Financial well-being is a significant concern as well, because it is for the whole population, but particularly when you're in your first job. You are more financially independent probably now than you were when you were at university. At uni, we have student loans, maintenance loans, grants. We have the support of our parents. We might have been living in halls or even living with our parents. So having that financial responsibility is going to be more significant now, especially if you've moved out of home, if you're responsible for paying rent, the bills, and also you're now fully responsible for your own money. And this might be significantly more than you were used to at uni. So it can be really tempting to go out and blow all your money at the beginning of the month. But what can happen is, as you get towards the end of the month, you get to that tight spot. And if you've got outstanding bills, or if anything happens that you need to pay for and you don't have that money, it can cause stress. And financial well-being is a significant concern, and is one of the leading causes, or one of the leading stresses at the moment that contributes to poor mental health. So it's really important to try and get into those good habits. I know it's easier said than done sometimes. Working too much and having that pressure to succeed is another challenge. So perfectionism is often a really common characteristic of graduates entering professional work. You might feel like you need to work more to be productive or to prove yourself in your role, but this can lead to overworking and burnout. Technology. It's great because it allows us to work virtually. We can get things done quickly. It allows us to be in contact with people, but it can impose on your personal time, especially when you've got access to work emails and chats on your personal laptop or your phone. And not all managers will model healthy behaviour either. So if you find yourself getting emails late at night or early in the morning, even if your manager doesn't expect you to respond then and there, it still causes pressure. I've experienced that myself in previous roles, and it is really difficult to deal with, even though they say, don't worry about responding now. If you read an email right before you go to bed, it makes it very difficult to switch off, and this can impact your sleep and a whole other load of things. Feedback is another one. So at university, feedback is usually really clear and consistent. You have a certain syllabus or criteria that you need to complete for each of the modules or terms to get the grade. And hopefully for most of the assignments you submit, you will have received constructive feedback. And as grades are standardized, it would have been a lot easier for you to understand where your personal performance level is relative to other students within your course. In the workplace, it's not always that clear. And sometimes you have to proactively seek feedback from your supervisor, which can feel really intimidating, especially if you haven't yet established a close relationship with your manager. And if you don't get feedback, it can be really demotivating and it can lead you to feel frustrated. And the final thing I put here is what's called psychological contract. And this refers to the unwritten expectations of an employee to their employer, and also the employee's beliefs about their rights and rewards that they're owed for their work and loyalty. So in other words, outside of your black and white contract, these are the expectations that your manager or your work expect you to meet. But also it refers to what you feel you are owed for the level of work that you're putting in. And sometimes there can be an imbalance. So you might feel like you're putting in loads of work, but not getting the right kind of reward or recognition. And this can be really frustrating, and it can lead to a bit of a conflict between the work you're putting in and the responsibilities you have, but your level of dedication and motivation. But ultimately, challenges are an inevitable part of life and work, and we can't always predict what's going to happen. And actually trying to do that and trying to anticipate all of these things that might happen can take you away from focusing on what's important and what is happening right now. And this can start to lead to anxious thoughts and anxious feelings. So we've got to enable ourselves to deal with things as and when they happen. And this is where resilience comes in. So what is resilience? I like to liken it to a rubber ball. So think of it as a rubber ball. It's our ability to bounce back in the event of adversity or a stressful situation. Generally speaking, it's how we cope with challenges, setbacks, and problems that happen at some point in our life. The ABC model is a really good example of how people have a different reaction to adversity and stress. And this is a really simple way to help us understand our reactions. And it also provides a really simple tool for improving resilience and the way that you respond to things. So A is the adversity, B is our belief. So A is the situation or the event that happens. B is the belief, so it's our explanation about why the event has happened and how we feel about it. And C is the consequence, which is the feelings and behaviours that our belief has caused. So this model argues that we create stress by consciously or unconsciously holding these irrational beliefs about ourselves and others. Obviously, there are situations that are going to be stressful and it's inevitable, but the way that we react to them will impact how we behave and how we respond to them, and really dictate whether they are a significant impact or we're able to take it in our stride. So the first step to becoming more resilient is to gain self-awareness by listening to your own interpretation of stressful events. So have a think now about what you say to yourself when you're upset or overwhelmed. Try and think about what your internal monologue is like when things go wrong. So do you beat yourself up, or do you start thinking about how you tackle the situation? Sometimes people have a natural tendency to beat themselves up or to make themselves feel worse about a situation, whereas others might see it as an opportunity to learn and to develop and get stronger. So this is where your belief comes in. But it's really important to ask yourself those questions when you're under stress and if you don't feel like you're coping well. Unhelpful emotions like shame or guilt can be intense and they can be long lasting, and they don't help us to solve a problem or take constructive action. Each of us has our own unique reactions to particular situations that can push our buttons. So identifying your beliefs will be able to give you insight into what kind of situations push your buttons. And once you've identified these beliefs, you can examine them for accuracy. It's important to pay particular attention to beliefs that seem irrational or inaccurate, and ask yourself, is there another way that you can view the situation? Are there other beliefs that would be more accurate or help explain what has happened, and then how you can deal with it? So here is a bit of an example. So you've received poor feedback for a presentation that you've given. Have a think about how you might respond initially in that situation. Your automatic beliefs might be that I'm a failure or I'm no good at my job. So think of what sort of emotions would follow that kind of belief. It might include sadness or despair, shame or guilt. And the resulting behaviour might be that you start avoiding giving presentations because you're incapable of doing any better. And this is going to impact your motivation. And you might end up not asking for help because you're ashamed and you don't want to put yourself out there. So if we flip that on its head now, you've received poor feedback for a presentation you gave, but this time you think that's frustrating and I'm disappointed, but I can do better. Now your emotions are probably that of feeling more motivated and determined. And as a result, you might start planning how you will improve the next time. And this could be asking your line manager for constructive feedback, or asking a colleague who you know is a confident presenter to help you. And this is going to result in more motivation. Notice the difference here in how our beliefs have a real influence on the way that we feel and behave in situations, to the point that unhelpful and negative self-belief can significantly dictate the outcome of future behaviours. And equally, if you have a tendency to assume the worst in things, and you know that maybe in the past you've not done so well at something, and so the next time that happened you might assume that you're going to do as bad, if not worse, then that's going to have a real impact on the way that you conduct yourself and the way that you feel about the situation and the way that you behave. So working on this belief part is what's really, really important, and this is what you can foster, and this is how you develop resilience. So how do you actually identify your beliefs? And sometimes it can be difficult to know that because often they're automatic and sometimes they're deeply ingrained. So there are exercises that you can use to do this. If you have access to the Thrive app, which hopefully all of you do, there is a section in there which is called Identifying Core Beliefs. And this is part of the CBT program, and this is what will teach you to do it. But generally speaking, what you can do is keep a diary or keep a journal, and you don't have to write pages and pages. You know, journaling isn't for everyone, but it's somewhere that you can write down your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions when experiencing significant stress or worry. So for example, if you're feeling stressed with work, write down what it is that's causing you to feel like that, such as too much work or not enough time or unsupportive colleagues, and then write down your thoughts about that situation and or what do you believe about that situation. So it could be that no one wants to help you, that your manager thinks you're going to fail, whatever that might be, but try and stick to the facts. So who, what, where, when, and how. And you can keep it really brief, so it doesn't have to be a long essay, but actually writing things down really helps our brain to process information. So if you do feel like you get easily overwhelmed or frustrated or stressed by things, then this can be a really good tool which you can use, which over time will become automatic. So write down the situation, how it's made you feel, and what thoughts have made you feel that way. And then you can start to identify patterns. So you might find that certain situations cause you to feel a particular way. You might identify that actually some of the thoughts that are associated with that situation might not be helpful. So being able to get into that habit of building self-awareness and understanding those beliefs is going to be really important for helping you to build resilience. If anyone's interested in learning a bit more about the way that your beliefs and your mindset impact your behaviour, then I recommend looking up the work by Dr. Carol Dweck. She is a pioneer in mindset, and she talks about the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset. And it's really interesting. So if you're interested, you can have a look at that. But hopefully by now we've got you thinking a bit more about how in many ways you really are in control of how adversity impacts you. Obviously, there are going to be situations that are very traumatic at times, and so sometimes it can be difficult to manage them and have these kind of strong, resilient reactions, and that is perfectly okay and it's normal. But if you're able to reframe negative everyday situations to be one that create an opportunity for learning, it will help you be more resilient. And this is all about fostering a growth mindset, which is essentially seeing everything as an opportunity to learn and develop, as opposed to avoiding putting yourself out there for fear of appearing wrong, weak, or incompetent. And most of us are guilty at some aspects of this at some aspects of our lives, whether it be in our relationships or our work and so on. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that, then look up the work by Carol Dweck. So now we're going to go on to how to actually improve resilience and some helpful coping strategies. So when we talk about helpful coping strategies, these are things that are good for you. And it can be really easy sometimes to slip into a habit of reaching for more unhelpful coping strategies, which might be drinking or smoking more. Sometimes people smoke more when they feel stressed. Or we might eat junk food, for example. I do that sometimes if I'm feeling I need a bit of comfort, or you're feeling stressed. It's quite normal to sometimes reach for those unhelpful coping habits. But in the long term, they don't help, and they can actually make things worse, especially if you're doing things like drinking or smoking. They can impact your sleep, they impact your physical health, and so on. I'm not going to give you a lecture on physical health, because you probably know it already. But you need to learn helpful coping strategies. So developing resilience is a very personal thing, and there is no one-size-fits-all technique. You might need to experiment to find what works best for you, but these are some things that you can try. So exercise, socializing, eating well, getting enough sleep, these are basic and surefire ways of managing stress. Sometimes sleep is easily impacted if you're feeling stressed, so you need to learn how to have a wind down schedule, and this is where making sure that you're not checking emails before you go to bed, you're limiting your exposure to blue light, so not looking at your phone, turning off your laptop around an hour before bed, and also planning some relaxation into that wind down routine. But generally speaking, planning and scheduling your time can be a really good way of dealing with and managing stress. So it can help you to feel more in control. If you've got a lot on your plate, or if you know you've got a really busy week coming up, it can be really easy to just live day to day. And this is when you can come a bit out of sorts. You might not plan what you're going to eat, or when you'll sleep, or when you'll relax or socialize. And this is where you can get overwhelmed by things. So actually making a plan and scheduling, even if it's day to day, writing a list of things that you need to do, can help you feel more in control. It boosts feelings of self-esteem and self-efficacy, all of which help to foster resilience and motivation. Compared to if you feel like things are outside of your control, you might feel hopeless and demotivated. This is something that I've personally found has worked really well for me, especially during busy periods of work. I've never normally done this, but I now start each day by writing a to-do list, and I tick things off as I go. And it makes me feel really motivated and far more on top of things, which saves me having to remember everything. Ensure you make time for relaxation. How you switch off and relax will be different for everyone, but it's important that you have ways of being able to fully detach from work or whatever it is that's making you stressed. It could be something as simple as watching your favorite TV show, exercising, cooking, or spending time with friends. But as long as you're able to fully immerse yourself in the activity and not be thinking about other things, that's what's important. You can also practice relaxation exercises like deep muscle relaxation, meditation, or deep breathing. I personally find doing short yoga classes on YouTube, which are designed for relaxation, work best for me. And they contain lots of deep breathing and mindfulness. So it's about working out what works best for you. But the Thrive app contains all of these, not YouTube and yoga, but it has all of these relaxation exercises that you can try. So I recommend trying a few out and seeing what works best for you. And all of the exercises are designed to teach you how to use them in everyday situations. So you're not relying on the app every time you want to do a session of calm breathing or meditation. So give it a try and see what works best. CBT is also a really helpful technique. CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, and yes, it is a therapy and it's an effective treatment for a variety of mental health conditions, but it's also a really good life skill, and it teaches you things that can help you in everyday situations and build your resilience. So it's all about how we think, feel and act. So CBT helps you to identify unhelpful thoughts and beliefs and how to reframe them to be more helpful. And as a result, you'll be able to respond more effectively in stressful situations. And again, the app has a CBT program which can help you to build these skills. But in simple terms, imagine a situation where you might have reacted impulsively based on a feeling such as anger or sadness. You might have reacted really impulsively, and it might not have been the best reaction. So you may have then looked back and felt guilty or ashamed of the way you responded. So CBT teaches you how, before that happens, to identify whether a situation or a thought warrants that kind of reaction and how to reframe it better. So it helps you deal with it better. Thought and mood journaling, as I mentioned before, writing things down like worries or things you're stressed about helps your brain to process them better. So no need to write pages and pages. It could just be a list of things that you're feeling stressed about. And you can allocate yourself what we like to call a worry budget. So take no more than 30 minutes a day to work through your list and organise it into things that you can do something about now and things you might have to deal with later. Be realistic about what you can and can't control and accept your limitations, and try to problem solve them. So working through things like this can really help you to think about what would actually happen if that situation occurred. So a lot of the time, things that we feel worried about are things that are outside of our control and they're not actually happening right now. So they might be things that we anticipate are going to happen in the future and therefore worry about. But that's not helpful because they're not happening right now. And what happens is it can take you away from important things right now and take you away from how you're feeling in a particular moment. So if you do find yourself getting worried or stressed about things, write a list of what they are, and then on a daily basis or every couple of days, give yourself no more than 30 minutes to work through that list one by one. Things that you think you can deal with now, make a plan. So think, how would I respond if that happened, or what am I going to do about this? And what you'll start to realise is that there are things that are very simple to solve then and there, and that things that might happen in the future, you realise that you'd actually be able to deal with them better. So it helps you to kind of manage those feelings of anxiety and worry that sometimes occur. Utilise the support that's available to you. So this is something that we can that can be quite common. If you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or worried about something, it can be really easy to just internalise it. You might not want to ask your colleagues for support because you're worried that it's going to be too much for them, or that you're going to bother them, or they won't understand, or they'll judge you. But try and put yourself in someone else's shoes and imagine that your colleague came to you with the same challenge or the same feeling. How would you respond? More often than not, you would probably want to help them and you would want them to talk to you and you'd want to do whatever you could to support them. So it's a two-way street. So try and put yourself in that mindset, and because asking for help can be really, really supportive. And when you are graduates, you're all in the same situation. So lean on each other, talk to each other, have catch-ups, and especially if you're working virtually, schedule some time in for a virtual coffee break or a tea break, or meet up with people outside of work and do things where you're not talking about work. having this kind of building this social support network is really, really important, and utilize things like your friends and your family. Build a wellbeing action plan or a wellness action plan. This is something that some of you might have heard of or might not, but there's loads of tools and kind of resources online that can help you build one. But essentially, it's a practical tool which helps you to identify things that might cause you stress and what to do in those situations. And this can be something that you can talk through with your line manager. And this isn't just for people that have had experience of mental health at work, it's for people that want to stay proactive and healthy. So you might think of what situations cause you to feel stress. It might be tight deadlines, it might be feeling like you've not got enough time to get things done, or feeling like you've got too much pressure on your shoulders. So those are the situations, but then what sort of things will help you to deal with those? And it might be asking for support for colleagues, or planning your work ahead of time, and then how your manager can support you with that. And this can really help to facilitate conversations about mental health and wellbeing with your line manager. You can use it to form the basis of one-to-ones, or you can do it with each other. So it's a really good resource that you can use, and Mind has a very good one that I would recommend using. So just remember that as well, to take time to acknowledge everything that you've achieved so far. So we've talked about a lot of the challenges that you may be facing or might face, and ways to improve resilience, but it's important to take time to acknowledge everything that you've achieved to date. It's so easy to get bogged down by everything that we feel isn't going so well, or that we're not very good at, and we forget to recognise the capabilities that we already have that have got us to where we are. In what has arguably been one of the most bizarre and stressful few months of our lives, you've managed to complete your degrees or get and maintain a job. So remembering this kind of can-do positive attitude can really help you to feel better when times are feeling stressed or you're not feeling so good. And over time, you'll learn which strategies will help you to remain calm and resilient, which includes some of the things that we've talked about today. But just to re-emphasize that you're not expected to be perfect all the time and never be affected by stress or setbacks, either as a student, an employee, or even as a person. And it is completely natural, and almost everyone struggles with adversity and stress at times. But one of the best actions that you can take is knowing when to ask for help. So maybe after this session, you can go away and do a bit of a reflective exercise and have a think about whether there are things in your life currently that are causing you to feel stressed or overwhelmed. And have a think about, is there a way that you can deal with them now? Is there a plan that you can make? Or is there someone that can support you with this, whether it's having a catch up with your line manager or speaking to your parents or some friends? And maybe think about building that into a wellness action plan. So just as a quick recap then, we've talked about stress as a normal and healthy human response caused by our own perceptions. So that's the key, it's our perceptions. Optimum levels of stress can help us to perform better, and they motivate us. So having some pressure is perfectly good, and it can help us do better and work better. But poorly managed stress can lead to physical and mental health problems. So it's important to address those and reduce stress by altering your perceptions to situations and managing pressures. So if you've got multiple things on your plate going on at one time, have a think, is there anything that you can do to slightly alleviate some of that pressure? And that might be spending less time working outside of normal working hours, or spending more time with family and friends. Develop personal resilience by making changes. Promote physical health, be kinder to yourself, and really build those skills to identify some of those unhelpful beliefs, which will help you deal with situations better. And finally, this is how you access the Thrive app. So hopefully all of you will have heard of it, may have used it, may have it, but you just download it from your Apple or Android store, search for Thrive Mental Wellbeing, follow the instructions in the app to sign up, and then you'll have an access code which will be given to your company. So if you don't know that, just ask someone in HR or in the wellbeing team. So that brings us to the end of the session.